Man, yesterday we had a pretty unexpected result during crypto week that might have set us back on legislation. The procedural vote actually failed that had the crypto legislation in there. I'm going to tell you what that means, why Bitcoin dropped 3% yesterday, and what to expect to some degree moving forward. This is Joe from Joe Knows the Cryptos. If you're not a subscriber, now's a great time to hit the subscribe button, like, share, do all those things. And with that, remember, I'm not a financial advisor. This is certainly not financial advice. I'm just telling you what's going on in the marketplace and what I may or may not be doing about it. With that, let's get into it, talking about Bitcoin and look at where Bitcoin was yesterday. This is the drop we saw yesterday. This drop was, let's call it 3.15% drop on the 15th. You know, we've already rebounded quite a bit, but that drop partially, we came off a high of, 123, coming down here to all the way down to about a 6% drop from its high just the day before on the 14th. And really, a lot of this has to do with the procedural vote that failed to pass the House. And it failed by a margin of, I think it was like 196 to 223. And so what that really means, that procedural vote is not all about, that wasn't a specific vote on the crypto legislation, the Genius Act. I actually expect that we'll see the Genius Act passed today, if not tomorrow. Today's Wednesday, July 16th. Tomorrow's Thursday, July 17th. And so here's the deal. That procedural vote, that is really just a procedure in order to get to vote on the individual bills. There's lots of things lumped into there, military spending, cutbacks, as well as the Genius Act. So there's about 12 holdouts on the super conservative holdouts that didn't think that the bill went far enough to separate, some of the spending bills didn't go far enough to reduce costs. They also didn't think that the anti-CBDC Act went far enough to protect us from a CBDC. So I'm sure these things will get worked out because at the end of the day, the Genius Act sailed through. It was almost a bipartisan, it wasn't truly bipartisan, but a lot of Democrats did vote for it. So I believe, and this isn't financial advice, but I do see that we'll probably get a positive vote for that today, if not tomorrow. That's why today the market's reacting in kind. I mean, if you look at this rebound, we've already rebounded back to about the 118, 119. We went up to 119.245. So we've gotten back about 2.5% of the 6% we've lost since its all-time high. So looking at Bitcoin, we're still, we still broke out of that range. We're in uncharted territory, never before. And we've got a ways to run before we hit the ceiling of this, the long term. If you pull this out, this upward wedge, this upward ascending channel that's been going on for years. The beginning of 2024. We're still within that. We could break out of this cycle depending on institutional adoption. You have all these countries, companies, everybody seems to want a piece of the Bitcoin. So also, other exciting things that, you have people talk about Bitcoin dominance. Bitcoin dominance is slowly dropping. We're starting to see altcoin, I wouldn't say it's altcoin season, but Ethereum has gone up against Bitcoin. Altcoins are starting to go up. My XRP Bitcoin trade, my Solana Bitcoin trade, Bitcoin's still outpacing Solana, but Ethereum start to outpace Bitcoin. So that's been a fun trade to be in. We've gone down from, we were up at like 65% on Bitcoin dominance. Now we're down to 62%. Or 63%. This says 62, but this says 63. Very confusing. But my point is that the Bitcoin dominance is dropping, and we're seeing a huge surge. Even though it's 0.11 into others, that's manifested into decent gains in things like XRP, Solana, Cardano, other things. Even my Pengu coin, which Pengu's been pretty interesting, has been crushing it. There's a lot of social things going on with that. But all in all, the market is starting to it's starting to feel like altcoin season. We're starting to progress towards down that road. So look, here's what else is going on this week. We still have crypto week. They're going to talk about the Genius Act, the Clarity Act. They're going to talk about the anti-CBDCs. I have some notes up here I'm going to look up for a second. But yeah, we still have the standalone votes for the Clarity Act, the Genius Act, the Stablecoin Act, which I think is going to happen pretty soon. So we're going to see that come to fruition. The end of the crypto week is this week. It's a full week in the House to talk about these legislations to bring transparency and clarity to the crypto markets, which I think is going to be huge. When investors know that they can get in there without worry of losing all of their money, and stablecoins are actually backed 1-to-1 by either treasuries or dollars, not only is that good for the U.S. dollar and help reduce the cost of our debt, because when you buy a treasury, you run the price up, which has an inverse relationship to yield or interest rates. Well, so now we're going to reduce the cost of our debt by having people buy our treasuries. Right now, I don't think they want a ton of our treasuries. They're worried about our debt. But this is one more way out of our $37 trillion debt problem. So all in all, I think it's still pretty positive, even though the House failed to pass a procedural vote to move forward to vote individually on the Genius Act. I see that as as posturing by these staunch hardcore conservatives. I think that they'll come to agreement in terms, because I think they also want these things to happen. They just want to put their spin on it for their constituents. This is what happens in politics. In any event, I think the Genius Act has a very strong chance of pushing through this week. I think the poly markets were at 90% yesterday before the procedural vote. Not sure exactly where they are today, but I'm sure there's still a very strong chance. That being said, I hope you got some value out of this. If you did, hit the like, share, subscribe, all the buttons, and we'll see you next time.